Today's video is going to be on the imperfect tense, and you can find a note sheet to accompany this video on page 18 of your packet. It is super important that you take good notes on this note sheet. This is a concept that we're going to spend a lot of time on, and it can be a little bit confusing, especially when we start to pair it with the other past tense. So again, please make sure that you're taking good notes, you're following along, and that you write down or remember any questions that you have so that you can ask them in class. So let's get started. The imperfect tense is another past tense in Spanish. Now, this is kind of a unique concept because in English we don't have more than one past tense. So the difference between this past tense and the other past tense, which is the preterite, is something that we'll cover a little bit later. Right now I just want to talk about the imperfect, how it's formed, and when we use it. So the imperfect is used to describe something that was not perfected or something that was not completed in the past. So we use this for a few different things. So we use it to talk about something that was happening, such as I was running or I was talking on the phone. Talk about something that you used to do, like I used to go to the park every day, or I used to ride my bike after school at 4 o'clock every day when I was in middle school. You also use the imperfect to say how old someone was. And you use it to tell what time it was. So the imperfect tense, most verbs in the imperfect are regular. There are only 3 irregular verbs in the preterite, so that makes this a little bit easier. The endings for AR verbs are as follows. Aber, so again you add this, once you take off the ending of a verb, you add this as the new ending. So we have aber, abas, aba, habamos con acento, habáis, and haban. So an example would be the verb estar. So if we have the verb estar, we would take off the AR and add the new ending. So we have estaba, yo estaba, tú estabas, él o usted estaba, nosotros estábamos con acento, vosotros estabais, and ellos y ustedes estaban. ER and IR verbs take the same exact endings in the imperfect tense. Keep in mind that all of these have an accent mark. So we have ia, ias, ia, íamos, iais, and ian. So an example of an ER verb might be the verb hacer, to do or to make. We would have hacía, hacías, hacía, hacíamos, hacíais, and hacían. And then finally, an IR verb might be the verb salir, salía. Again, IR verbs and ER verbs take the exact same endings. So salía, salías, salía, salíamos, salíais, and salían. So this is how all regular verbs are formed. You take off the ending of the infinitive verb and you add the new endings. And again, there are some examples over here. The best thing about the imperfect is that there are only 3 irregulars, okay? The thing that you have to be careful about is that notice that the yo form endings and the el, ea, usted form endings are the same. So you have to always clarify your subject when you're talking in the imperfect, especially in the yo and the el, ea, usted forms. Otherwise, you may not know. Now let's start by looking at the 3 irregular verbs. These are 3 verbs that in almost all tenses, these are irregular. Ser, very first verb that we learned, we know that that is a weird verb. It's weird in English, weird in Spanish. Also, ir and ver, those are verbs that are always going to be a little bit irregular. So I did type in the forms of these verbs for you, but it might be helpful if you write them in just to make sure that you get a little bit of practice. It'll help you remember. So the verb ser in the yo form, era, yo era, tú eras, él, ella, usted era, nosotros éramos, vosotros erais, and ellos, ellas, ustedes eran. Then we have the verb ir, to go. I go, yo iba, tú ibas, él, ella, usted iba, nosotros íbamos, con acento, vosotros ibais, y ellos, ellas, ustedes iban. And then finally the verb ver, to see. Yo veía, tú veías, él, ella, usted veía, nosotros veíamos, vosotros veíais, y ellos, ellas, ustedes veían. And notice that all of the forms of the verb ver in the imperfect tense have an accent, so make sure that you do include that. So for homework, aside from just completing this note sheet, I would like you to complete the back. And I know there are quite a few on there, so how about if you do just 1 through 9, and all I want you to do is conjugate the verb in parentheses to fit the subject. So careful, because some of them are ER verbs, some of them are IR verbs, and some are AR verbs. Also, we have a couple reflexive verbs in there, so make sure you account for that as well. So we'll just do number 1 together. Our verb is saber. Our subject is él, so we know that the él, ella, usted ending for an ER verb is going to be ia. So our verb is going to be sabía. Él sabía hacer los crucigramas. He used to know how to do crossword puzzles. So again, for homework, please make sure that you do numbers 1 through 9 and come to class prepared with any questions that you have about the imperfect tense.